Welcome back to the channel where you can learn how to get paid while you sleep. In today's video, our hero is breaking down his July 2024 Robinhood dividend income portfolio and walking you through each stock and ETF that contributed to this month's passive income. As you will see, it's been a strong month, with the dividends adding up to the highest total yet. He'll also be sharing each stock's dividend yield and their annual dividend, so you can get a better sense of why these are powerful wealth-building tools. So, if you're looking to build a steady stream of income through dividends, stick around and find out how much our hero made this month. Also, be sure to include any comments, questions, or recommendations you have below to hear directly from our hero. Over to you, DH.
First up, let's talk about my favorite income generators: JEPI, JEPQ, USAI, DIA, and DGRS. These are ETFs with monthly distributions that have been consistent performers for me. The JP Morgan Equity Premium Income (JEPI) ETF dividend paid $19.49. The JEPI dividend yield is 7.89%, and its annual dividend is $6.06 per share. JEPI continues to be one of my top dividend payers with a strong yield. It's designed to deliver both income and growth by focusing on lower volatility. The JP Morgan Nasdaq Equity Premium Income (JEPQ) ETF dividend paid $26.82. Dividend yield is 9.14%. Annual dividend is $6.64 per share. JEPQ complements JEPI nicely but focuses on Nasdaq stocks. If you're into tech but still want solid income, this ETF is a winner. The Global ex-US Infrastructure Development (USAI) ETF dividend paid $13.31. The dividend yield is 6.92%. Annual dividend is $1.78 per share. USAI focuses on American energy independence and offers a pretty solid dividend yield for those interested in energy sector exposure. The SPDR Dow Jones Industrial Average (DIA) ETF dividend paid $7.50. The dividend yield is 2.03%. The annual dividend is $6.34 per share. DIA tracks the Dow Jones and offers decent dividends. Although its yield is lower, it's a solid holding for capital appreciation and monthly distributions. The WisdomTree US Small Cap Quality Dividend Growth Fund (DGRS) dividend paid $2.45. The dividend yield is 1.93%, and the annual dividend is $1.09 per share. DGRS focuses on small-cap companies with strong dividend growth potential, so it's more of a long-term play in my portfolio. And if bonds are more your style, you might want to check out BLV, SUB, VTEB, and MUB. Some are even tax-advantaged so that you can save money come April 15th. Those tax advantages might also extend to the state level, depending on where you live and the local tax code. Historically, bonds provide a reliable, diverse, and steady stream of income with protection against a broader market downturn. The Vanguard Long-Term Bond (BLV) ETF dividend paid $12.37, has a dividend yield of 4.03%, and an annual dividend of $4.22 per share. BLV gives me exposure to long-term bonds, which adds some stability to my portfolio, especially when the stock market gets volatile. The Vanguard Tax-Exempt Bond (VTEB) ETF dividend paid $8.73, has a dividend yield of 2.26%, and an annual dividend of $2.36 per share. This ETF is federally tax-exempt, making it great for after-tax accounts like mine. It's not the highest payer, but it's perfect for minimizing tax liabilities. The iShares National Muni Bond (MUB) ETF dividend paid $8.04, has a dividend yield of 2.26%, and an annual dividend of $2.36 per share. MUB focuses on municipal bonds, which are often exempt from federal taxes and in some cases even state taxes depending on where you live. It's a great option for those of us looking to keep more of what we earn. The iShares Short-Term National Muni Bond (SUB) ETF dividend paid $5.60, has a dividend yield of 1.84%, and an annual dividend of $1.83 per share. SUB is similar to MUB, but instead of longer-term bonds, it focuses on short-term municipal bonds. These tend to be less sensitive to interest rate changes, so they provide a bit more stability in a rising rate environment. Now let's look at some of the high-yield business development companies, BDCs, and real estate investment trusts, REITs, in my portfolio that keep those dividends rolling in. The Main Street Capital, Main dividend paid $18.07, has a dividend yield of 7.07% and an annual dividend of $2.76 per share. Main is a BDC that focuses on investing in small to mid-sized companies. It has a fantastic yield and pays monthly, making it a core part of my dividend strategy. The Gladstone Investment Corp, GAIN, dividend paid $19.53. GAIN has a dividend yield of 8.53% and an annual dividend of 90 cents per share. GAIN has consistently delivered strong dividends with a solid yield, and like Main, it's monthly, which is always a bonus. The Gladstone Capital Corporation, GLAD dividend paid $26.24. GLAD's dividend yield comes in at 9.24% and has an annual dividend of 84 cents per share. GLAD is another BDC that I love for its high yield. If you're looking for monthly dividend payers, you definitely want to check this one out. The Realty Income Corp, O dividend paid $16.86. The O dividend yield is 5.34%, and the annual dividend is $3.07 per share. Realty Income is one of my all-time favorite REITs because of its monthly dividend. With a 5.34% yield, it's a fantastic income generator. O is often called the monthly dividend company, and it certainly lives up to that name in my portfolio. Now let's move to broad market ETFs that provide a steady stream of quarterly dividends. One thing of note is that the Vanguard distributions are usually in March, June, September, and December. Sometimes they are later, and that's why you see them in this month's distributions. The Vanguard Mega Cap ETF MGC dividend paid $11.16. It has dividend yield of 1.56% and an annual dividend of $4.02 per share. MGC gives me exposure to the largest U.S. companies. While the yield is modest at 1.56%, this ETF focuses on growth with a nice touch of dividend income. It's a great balance between stability and growth potential. The Vanguard Mega Cap Growth ETF, MGK dividend paid $3.58. MGK's dividend yield is 0.59%, and the annual dividend is $1.06 per share. MGK is all about growth. It has a lower dividend yield at 0.59%, but I hold it more for a long-term capital appreciation. If you're looking for a bit of income and a lot of growth potential, MGK is a solid choice. The Invesco QQQ Trust QQQ dividend paid $5.79 for the month of July. It has a dividend yield of 0.58% and an annual dividend of $1.81 per share. QQQ tracks the NASDAQ 100, giving exposure to some of the biggest tech companies. Its dividend yield is only 0.58%, but the growth potential in QQQ is massive, making it a long-term winner in my portfolio. Next up is the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, SCHD. The SCHD dividend paid $34.66. It has a very respectable dividend yield of 3.60% and an annual dividend of $2.67 per share. SCHD is one of my favorite dividend ETFs with a solid balance of yield and growth. The Spider S&P 500 ETF, SPY dividend paid $11.38. It has a dividend yield of 1.52% and an annual dividend of $5.03 per share. SPY is one of the most well-known ETFs, tracking the S&P 500. While it doesn't have the highest dividend yield, it's a staple for growth and income. The Vanguard Small Cap Value ETF, VBR dividend paid $18.05, has a dividend yield of 2.33% and an annual dividend of $3.20 per share. VBR focuses on small cap value stocks, offering a nice balance of income and growth potential. With a 2.33% yield, it's one of my better dividend payers this month, and I love having exposure to the smaller, more undervalued companies. The Vanguard Information Technology, VGT ETF dividend paid $4.79, has a dividend yield of 0.66% and an annual dividend of $3.14 per share. VGT is all about tech, tracking top technology companies. The yield is modest at 0.66%, but the tech sector has been growing like crazy, so I hold VGT for its potential for long-term capital appreciation along with a bit of dividend income. The Vanguard Dividend Appreciation, VIG ETF dividend paid $16.70, has a dividend yield of 1.96% and an annual dividend of $3.05 per share. VTEB focuses on companies with a history of growing their dividends, which makes it a great option for both income and stability. A 1.96% yield might not sound like a lot, but these are companies that keep growing and paying more over time. The Vanguard Real Estate ETF, VNQ Dividend, paid $39.59, has a dividend yield of 3.72% and an annual dividend of $4.52 per share. VNQ gives me exposure to real estate without having to own physical property. The dividend yield is solid, and I love having this ETF in my portfolio for diversification. The Vanguard Russell 1000 Growth VONG ETF Dividend paid $5.40, has a dividend yield of 0.58%, and an annual dividend of $1.45 per share. VONG gives me exposure to growth stocks within the Russell 1000. Similar to QQQ, it's more of a growth play, but with a decent little dividend on the side. At 0.58%, it's not huge, but I hold it for the growth potential. The Vanguard S&P 500 VOO ETF Dividend paid $12.55, has a dividend yield of 1.49%, and an annual dividend of $6.13 per share. VOO is one of the most popular ETFs out there, tracking the S&P 500. With a yield of 1.49%, it gives me exposure to large-cap companies while also delivering solid dividend income. The Vanguard S&P 500 Growth VOG ETF Dividend paid $4.74, has a dividend yield of 0.73%, and an annual dividend of $1.52 per share. VOOG focuses on growth stocks within the S&P 500. It's got a modest yield at 0.73%, but I hold it for the growth potential within the large cap space. The Vanguard S&P 500 Value VOOV ETF Dividend paid $18.75, has a dividend yield of 2.24%, and an annual dividend of $3.01 per share. VOV, on the other hand, focuses on value stocks within the S&P 500. With a 2.24% yield, it's a solid dividend payer and balances out the growth ETFs in my portfolio. The Vanguard Mid Cap Growth VOT ETF Dividend paid $5.52, has a dividend yield of 0.78%, and an annual dividend of $1.56 per share. VOT focuses on mid-cap growth stocks. The dividend yield is 0.78%, but I like having exposure to mid-sized companies with potential for long-term growth. It's another growth-focused ETF with a bit of income to sweeten the deal. The Vanguard Growth VUG ETF Dividend paid $4.42, has a dividend yield of 0.63%, and an annual dividend of $1.43 per share. VUG tracks growth stocks across different sectors and has a 0.63% yield. It's one of my go-to ETFs for long-term growth, with a nice sprinkle of dividend income to top it off. The Vanguard Large Cap VV ETF Dividend paid $12.18, has a dividend yield of 1.53%, and an annual dividend of $3.44 per share. VV is a large cap ETF that covers the entire U.S. large cap space. It's got a 1.53% yield, which is pretty solid for large cap exposure. I love VV because it offers stability, growth, and consistent income. The Vanguard Total Stock Market VTI ETF Dividend paid $12.39, has a dividend yield of 1.48%, and an annual dividend of $3.17 per share. VTI covers the entire U.S. stock market, offering a great combination of growth and income. This is a long-term hold in my portfolio. That wraps my dividends for my Robinhood portfolio in July 2024. Back to the studio.
Let's wrap things up with a quick recap and final thoughts on the Hero's July dividend income. Before we get to the total dividends for the month, if you found this information helpful, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button to get updates on this growing portfolio. Now for the fun part, let's tally up our total. Our hero made $69.57 from monthly ETFs, $34.74 from bond ETFs, $80.70 from BDCs and REITs, and finally a whopping $221.65 from quarterly ETFs. Altogether, the dividends this month came to an impressive total of $406.66. And that's money that went straight back into purchasing even more shares through dividend reinvestment. Dividends are an awesome way to build wealth over time, especially if you're reinvesting them like our hero. If you're serious about creating passive income through investing, make sure to diversify your portfolio and focus on consistent payers with good yields. Also remember to consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions, as this is for information purposes only. Thanks for watching.